YouTube and welcome to Prime Productions. I'm here to help enhance your tabletop gaming experience. If you're new to this channel, I primarily cover Paizo tabletop role-playing games like Pathfinder and Starfinder. And welcome back to Inspired Campaigns, where I talk about how to make a Pathfinder campaign inspired by a pop culture franchise. So a while ago, I held a YouTube poll asking what Dungeons & Dragons campaign setting you all would like to see me try to convert to Pathfinder 2e, and the response was Eberron. So let's get into it. Before we get started, if you are going to do an Eberron campaign in Pathfinder, make sure you tell your players beforehand. An Eberron game is going to be different from a normal Pathfinder game, and some people may not be into that, so make sure everybody is on board first. So, Eberron is a D&D campaign that's a bit odd. It was designed by a guy named Keith Baker in 2002 as part of a contest to write a new official D&D campaign setting, and his won out. It has since gone on to be one of the most successful D&D campaign settings. Even the Dungeons & Dragons MMO, no, not that one, this one, is based on the Eberron setting. Now, Eberron is a bunch of things to a bunch of different people, and there is no one right way to describe it. Kind of like Pathfinder's Galarian, it's sort of a fantasy kitchen sink where most wackadoo things you could want are available, and it is glorious. Yes, that is an image of a halfling riding a dinosaur while fighting a robot man on top of a levitating lightning train. If I had to summarize Eberron, though, I'd say that the best description I can come up with is, what if people were as industrious and innovative with magic as the real world is with technology? What would that look like? And yeah, I guess the answer is robot men on lightning trains. Now here's the thing, Keith Baker is prolific, as is everyone else who has and does work on Eberron, so there's an absurd amount of Eberron stuff out there and I will not be able to cover it all. This will have to be a very oversimplified video. Other people have done their takes. Arcane Arcade is doing a whole Pathfinder Eberron campaign, link in the description below, and others have made a fan-made document that is almost 300 pages long describing in detail how to convert Eberron into Pathfinder. If you are a huge Eberron fan, that is going to be your go-to. I'll link that in the description below too. Props to the people who made that, by the way. But people voted to ask me how I would convert Eberron to Pathfinder, so the following is how I would do it. This is going to be a quick and dirty conversion. It is not going to be perfect. This is designed to be a sort of baby's first meeting of Eberron and Pathfinder, if you will. If you like it, maybe go check out that 300-page document or do some of your own research and add nuances to some of my oversimplified conversions. This is designed to give new people a foot in the door, not be a complete 100% accurate conversion. So like normal with these campaign videos, I'm going to break it down into sections. The first is going to be a super broad and oversimplified lore section to get everyone a feel for the world, followed by sections discussing appropriate ancestries, classes, equipment, and then I'll end with some optional house rules that I'd include for an Eberron game before finally doing a final overview. One last thing before we get started in earnest. In the very first Eberron book, Keith Baker set out 10 rules for Eberron, and rule number 1 is essentially, if there's room for it in D&D, there's room for it in Eberron. Now he is talking about D&D, but I think the intent is clear. Eberron is a world where most things are possible. So if you have a problem with any of my conversions because it isn't supported by Eberron lore, just try to remember that quote from Keith if you could. So, lore. Remember, there's a ton of lore in Eberron and I will not be able to cover it all, so I'm just hitting the highlights. The creation myth of Eberron starts with 3 dragons the size of planets, maybe? Anyway, there was a good, neutral, and evil dragon. Well, evil dragon is gonna evil, so he decides to ambush and kill the good dragon, whose blood and body becomes a massive ring in the sky. The neutral dragon knows where this is going and decides to defend themselves and kinda, sorta wins. After a super long fight, they wrap themselves around the evil dragon and the two become the planet of Eberron, with the neutral dragon becoming the ground and the evil dragon becoming the rotten core. The evil dragon's body spawns monsters which can come up through the ground and attack people on the surface, by the way. That's where a lot of Eberron's monsters come from. Now, I don't 100% understand this next part, so bear with me. I think that the reason those first 3 dragons fought was because they discovered or maybe created a prophecy. You see, there's a kind of draconic energy that resonates throughout the planet. The currents in the air, the strata in the ground, the migration patterns of birds, it all resonates with this draconic pattern. And if someone is smart enough and has studied that pattern for long enough, like hundreds of years minimum, they can start to understand that it forms a kind of prophecy. The Draconic prophecy. Now, the Draconic prophecy isn't so much a prophecy, though, and it's more a series of complicated if-then statements. Like if Harry kisses Sally, Lloyd will ascend to the throne 1,000 miles away. Only the prophecy is never that straightforward or easy to interpret. It is kind of a driving force in the series though, and many scholars seek to understand it. Related to the Draconic prophecy are the dragonmarks, and I will be honest, I understand them even less. Like the base concept is simple. Some family lineages in Eberron have this magical birthright called a dragonmark. Some, not all, but some members of this lineage will develop these magical birthmark tattoo things called dragonmarks that give them special magic. Each dragonmarked family gets a special dragonmark. Like House Galanda, a halfling clan has the Mark of Hospitality. Halflings in this family who develop the mark will get special powers that help them take care of travelers, like they can get the prestidigitation cantrip to clean an area or heat and cool food that they serve. They run a chain of successful inns. Anyway, people who focus on their dragon marks can develop them and have even more powers, and dragon-marked families operate as very powerful guilds in Eberron. What I don't get is that supposedly dragon marks are the physical representation or maybe a side effect of the Draconic prophecy somehow. I don't really know what that's supposed to mean or how anyone even knows that. Also, there are weird rules about them, like aberrant dragon marks that have seemingly random powers and appear on random people. Also, in some editions of Dungeons & Dragons, dragon marks are linked to a single ancestry, but in some editions they can, in super rare instances, appear outside of their bloodlines, and that gets some Eberron fans really mad. I'm sure me even mentioning it has made a person or two rage quit this video. There's a lot, and I'm sure I'm getting stuff wrong, just know that they are a thing. Moving on, I want to quickly talk about the dream realm in Eberron called Dal Quor. This is important for an ancestry option later. Basically, there is a dream realm attached to Eberron that kind of shifts between being good dream-focused and nightmare-focused every so often. Currently, it is in nightmare mode, and the nightmare dream entities are trying to keep it locked in nightmare mode by possessing and otherwise influencing mortals to spread nightmares. Now, there are also good aligned dream creatures, but the realm as a whole is nightmare-focused. Again, more complicated than that, just know that it's a thing. Another thing to know about in Eberron is the religion. Eberron is a lot more fast and loose with religions than normal Dungeons & Dragons. Religions and clerics in Eberron are much more about a cleric's faith than a deity granting them power. The world is also a lot more polytheistic. There are kind of 4 major religions and a ton of smaller ones, but the whole vibe is generally different than in other D&D campaigns. I'm going to go over some of the major religions in Eberron just in case you want to play a cleric or a champion, but be aware that the entire vibe is different. If you are going to do a quick and dirty conversion, there is the Sovereign Host, the Dark Six, the Silver Flame, and the Blood of Vol. The Sovereign Host and Dark Six are groups of gods, and together they form a pantheon of gods for Eberron. They are divided into the gods that are generally pro-civilization, the Host, and the gods that are anti-civilization, the Dark Six. Now, the Dark Six aren't exactly evil, but they are a bit more petty and vindictive, and they are not as well respected as the Host. Now, you can worship the individual gods of the Host and the Six, but most people tend to worship them as a whole. Like, if you were a priest of Onatar, god of blacksmithing, you would probably still pray to Dal Quor, god of trade, that your shipment of steel came in safe. You might even also pray to the Devourer, a Dark Six deity in charge of storms, that he doesn't sink your shipment of steel. All in all, people in Eberron tend to be more pantheistic than in other medieval fantasy settings. Now, the Silver Flame isn't even a god, but like an amalgam of angelic serpents that all died a long time ago and their spirits melded into one force for good, I think? Anyway, most people just know the Silver Flame as a church that does good. The Silver Flame is all about doing as much good as you can for the world, though they can be very ends justify the means at times for certain sects. Lastly, the religion of the Blood of Vol rejects gods altogether, and they rely on the immortal spirit that resides within all mortal creatures. They basically venerate the power of mortals to self-actualize. Kind of like if the Rahadum from Galarian got power from following the tenets of the laws of man. There's a lot more to them, including lots of creation of undead who aren't necessarily evil, lots to unpack there, and of course, remember, this is all vastly oversimplifying everything. Okay, now there's one last bit of lore I need to cover before we get to the mechanics, and guess what? We're actually going to talk about the people of Eberron. This is the continent of Khorvaire, and it's kind of the main continent where most of the stuff in Eberron happens. There are other continents, yes, but this is where a majority of Eberron stories take place. So around 4,000 years ago, humans came to Khorvaire from a different continent and settled the land. Years and years passed, kingdoms rose and fell, and eventually a king rose and united all humans under one banner. And things were pretty good for many generations. However, about 100 years ago, there was one king with 5 kids. Each kid was in charge of a section, roughly a fifth of the land, and then the king died. Now, normally the king's eldest son would become king, but all the other kids decided that they wanted to be ruler, and they all went to war with each other in a giant Game of Thrones. Now, remember those dragonmarked houses we talked about earlier? Well, House Cannith, the humans with a mark of making, used their magic to craft Warforged. These were sentient, created creatures made of metal, wood, and stone. They have souls and are basically the same as automatons from Pathfinder. Anyway, House Cannith made the Warforged and sold them to all sides of the conflict as war slaves because, war profiteering. This added fuel to the fire and basically made the conflict almost never-ending. The war raged on for 100 years and devastated the land. A few groups of people didn't like the war and split off from the main countries, but for the most part, the Big Five just kept fighting. Until the country of Sire kind of exploded. Okay, it didn't explode, but something happened. A deadly gray mist descended over the land, killing almost everyone and mutating the wildlife. It's bad there. And depending on the edition you're playing in, healing, both natural and magical, is either greatly diminished or just does not happen at all. No one knows why this happened either. Theories abound, from divine retribution to a deadly weapon from one of Sire's enemies to someone in Sire rolling a nat 1 on some big bad ritual to win the war. Whatever the case, the destruction and permanent desolation of an entire country forced all other countries to come to the negotiating table. You see, since they didn't know what happened to Sire, now called the Mournlands, they didn't want to risk it happening to them. And this is the backdrop for most adventures in Eberron. Corvair's military forces are all but depleted after the war, and they can't protect their civilians from roaming monsters and bandits. It's up to adventurers to stop all these threats and save the day because no one else can. And like I said, there are many more stories on many more continents, but if I keep talking about that, I'd never get to how to actually play Eberron in Pathfinder. So moving on to ancestries, what would be appropriate for an Eberron game? Most of the standard ancestries in player cores 1 and 2 are fine. Elves, dwarves, halflings, they're all there. Halflings ride dinosaurs and dark elves don't live underground, but they're all there in general. Also, many of the more monstrous ancestries like minotaurs, hobgoblins, gnolls, called Kolo in Pathfinder, they are also there. Leshies technically don't exist in Eberron sourcebooks, but I feel like if you ask the average Eberron player, hey, is it cool if I want to play a nature spirit who's inhabiting a plant body? Most players would shrug and say dope. Leshies don't go against lore is what I'm saying. There might be some sticking points for some Pathfinder ancestries like Ratfolk and Tripkey, which technically aren't mentioned in Eberron, but for the most part things are pretty similar. There are 4 ancestries specific to Eberron that we should talk about. The first and most obvious are the Warforged. Like I said, House Cannith, the dragon mark of making people, produce these sentient, living robot creatures out of metal, wood, and stone, though they aren't supposed to make them anymore. And yeah, just use the automaton ancestry from Pathfinder. Just make it common instead of rare, and you are good to go for the most part. There is some disparity between the abilities of D&D's Warforged and Pathfinder's automatons, but it's nothing insurmountable. Now remember that dream stuff I talked about earlier? How nightmare creatures are trying to infiltrate the waking world and spread nightmares? Well, the good-aligned dream creatures are trying to stop them. Years ago, they inhabited the body of several willing, good-aligned monks and merged with them to create a new ancestry called Kalishtar. And I do mean new. Kalishtar are now born, it's just those first monks that were transformed. Kalishtar are really hard to get into. They have this relationship with a dream spirit who is also part of them. It's hard to explain in one paragraph. The big takeaway is that they are mildly telepathic, so you could use the Lashunta ancestry from Starfinder for them, though there would of course have to be some heavy reflavoring. Shifters are basically people with a very weak lycanthropic or werewolf-like curse. They can't spread it except by having children, and they can basically change between a humanoid and a somewhat animalistic, usually predatory form. You could represent this by using a human with the versatile heritage of beastkin, or instead be a kitsune whose alternate form is a human and not a tiny fox. Pretty easy conversion. And of course, if you wanted to lean really hard into the predatory thing, Animal Instinct Barbarian would be the way to go. The final ancestry are changelings. These are people with limited shapeshifting abilities. They are distantly related to doppelgangers, but their shapeshifting is less pronounced. I know it looks a little wonky, but the Astrozoans from Starfinder would make a decent stand-in for them. Just make their default state look like this instead of this. The other option is to use the stats for Tanuki, who also have a bunch of ancestry shapeshifting abilities, but their heritage and feats don't work out for changelings quite as well. And yes, I know Pathfinder changelings are hagspawn, and there's a problem with names. You'll have to work that out in your own Eberron game. Moving on to what classes would be appropriate in an Eberron game. Now the easy answer is all of them, or at least most of them, but let's do a little bit more digging. First of all, almost all the martial classes from Pathfinder would get in with no problem. Ranger, fighter, rogue, monk, barbarian, everyone like that, all fine. Some Eberron fans chafe at firearms existing in their setting, so gunslingers might have to be restricted to crossbowmen only, but otherwise that's fine. Thaumaturges actually have a special place in Eberron. There's a tradition of wand slingers or wand-using specialists, so a wand thaumaturge would fit right in. The only martial classes that really have any sticking points are the alchemist and inventor. You see, while Eberron has a lot of technology, it's all magic-based technology, and alchemists and inventors don't cast spells on their own, so some more sticklery GMs might have a problem with it. An alchemist or inventor with wizard dedication or the like would probably fit right in, though, as a stand-in for an artificer, and Eberron is the home of artificers. Speaking of wizards, Eberron has a plethora of people who cast spells from spellbooks, so wizards and maguses are just fine. Eberron also has sorcerers and druids, and animists are probably fine as well. I think witches and oracles should be fine, though they technically don't appear in D&D books. Now, Eberron does have powerful beings granting mortals power through the warlock class, so reflavoring a warlock to witch or oracle should be fine. The warlock is a bit different mechanically, but the lore is similar. Psychics also work quite well in this setting. Previous editions of Eberron had psychics, and they'd be a good stand-in for D&D's aberrant mind sorcerer. Kalishtar stuff in particular is very psychic-coded. Kineticists are a bit harder. The traditional elemental planes don't exist in Eberron, though there are some planes that kinda come close. There is also a plane that's kinda connected to all the elements, and you could also probably have someone with elemental powers through some other shenanigans. Talk to your GM about that one. Summoners are a bit tricky. I haven't seen anything in Eberron of people befriending some spirit companion, but then again I haven't seen anything saying it goes against lore, so talk to your GM on that one as well. Exemplars are much the same way, though you could play a follower of the Blood of Vol who has learned how to harness their own spiritual energy in such a way as it gives them exemplar-like powers. Again, maybe talk to your GM on that one. Now, I'm sure you clocked that there are two classes I haven't talked about, and that is Cleric and Champion, and that is because of that religious thing I mentioned earlier. Clerics in Eberron tend to have one god or group that they root for, but they are much more polytheistic. So please keep that in mind when playing a Cleric or Champion of Eberron. But if you wanted to do a quick and dirty conversion, what I would do is take an existing Pathfinder stat block for a deity, covenant, or pantheon and just change up the edicts and anathemas to make it work. This would just be a way to get the mechanics across, and it is not perfect, I know. But it's quick and easy if you don't want to front-load your new players with high-level theology discussions. For the Sovereign Host, I'd use the stat blocks for a religion that are more community-focused, such as Urban Prosperity, Keepers of the Hearth, or Good Neighbors. For the Dark Six, I'd use something like the stat block for Milani, Sun Wukong, the Freeing Flame, or the Pandemonia. For the stat block of the Silver Flame, Radiant Prism is pretty good aligned, or you could just use Iomede's stat block. And for the Blood of Vol, the Faith in the Fallen Covenant is all about paying homage to those mortals who try to achieve their own form of divinity, so I feel like that stat block would work pretty well. And you could just change up the edicts and anathemas. Alright, moving on to equipment. Here's the thing. D&D magic items don't have transferable runes like Pathfinder does, and I don't think that matters. I understand that they are two different systems, but I don't think that stuff matters in the grand scheme of things. If you do, just don't allow runes to transfer between magic items and it should be fine. As for other items in the setting, it's pretty easy. Eberron has airships, Pathfinder has airships. What I'm saying is that most equipment exists in both settings. Sure, Eberron might not have chainswords, and Pathfinder doesn't have double weapons like the double-bladed scimitar, so there might be a few snags, but there shouldn't be any major problems. Eberron halflings do have boomerangs though, so those exist in both settings. The only thing I've seen some pushback on, like I said earlier, are firearms. Some people like them in Eberron, some people don't. For the record, Keith Baker, who admittedly is no longer in charge of Eberron, has said that he's fine with them in the setting, but some people are still vehemently against it. Firearms are just something you'll have to discuss with your GM for their Eberron game. I will say that magic-spewing firearm-like objects canonically exist in Eberron, and Pathfinder's beast guns would do a good job of representing that. Lastly, any special house rule or homebrew that we need to talk about? Well, aside from using the pervasive magic rules, remember Eberron does have industrialized magic, there is one we need to talk about: how to handle dragonmarks. Now, if you wanted to be fair, the best way to handle dragonmarks would be to have 12 whole new archetypes, one for each dragonmarked house. I do not have the kind of time or space it would take to playtest all of those and make sure they're all balanced. Instead, my quick and dirty conversion would be to make a dragon-marked background. This background would work like this. You get a boost to one of two attributes based on the dragonmark house, like those hospitality halflings might have a choice between wisdom and charisma, and then a free boost. Also, you would gain a lore skill based on the house, so for those hospitality halflings, maybe innkeeper lore or mercantile lore. Then you'd get a free innate cantrip based on the house, so prestidigitation for the hospitality guys. This is essentially the blessed background but switched up for each dragon-marked house. If you want to represent further developing your dragonmark, just play a sorcerer or someone with sorcerer dedication. It kinda fits as you're delving deeper into your own innate magical ability. Again, this is not a perfect solution, but it's great for a kind of foot-in-the-door idea and to not front-load your new players with information overload. Then as a GM, you can add in magical items that can only be crafted by or used by specific members of a dragon-marked house. And if that isn't to your liking, just check out that PDF I mentioned at the start of the video. They will have a much more in-depth dragon-marked house system. Okay, I promised an overview, so let's put that up on screen now. You can pause the video or take a screenshot if you need to. Lastly, I want to share something that the Eberron Discord server shared with me when I first showed up. They were very kind and welcoming, and they said this to me: there is no wrong way to play Eberron. I mean, if you're trying. No matter if you're trying to get as close to Keith Baker's original concept as possible, or if you want to play real fast and loose with dragonmarks, it's your version of Eberron, and there are no Eberron police that will come to your door and tell you to stop. Take what you like from the setting and have fun. Now, don't get me wrong, there were jerks in that community, same as any community. No place is perfect. But I'll always remember that opening interaction. Again, I want to thank that Eberron Discord community server for putting up with me and answering my annoying questions. Thanks to everyone there. And special thanks to joint Pathfinder Eberron experts Frederick Beitler and John Templeton for helping me write and edit this script. Hey, as a reminder, I have a Patreon. I'm going to try and post something fun there once a month, but honestly, it's just a way to help this channel keep financially viable. Just a few bucks a month, and I'm toying with the idea of adding a limited higher tier where you can request a specific video. Let me know what you think. And while you're down in the comments, make sure you like and subscribe. That tells not only me, but also YouTube that you like this kind of content and would like to see more. And until next time, thank you, good luck, and happy gaming!